Hey there, today I thought I'd share my knife guy origin story. This is just going to be sort of where I've come from and where I've ended up and all things I've done on the way. Obviously my knife guy story is intertwined heavily with my YouTube story, so it's going to have a bit of both in it, but we'll just start off right from the beginning. So probably the first point of contact I had with a pocket knife, apart from just, whatever I had on my kitchen block at home, was with a Swiss Army knife. Not this exact one, but one of very similar size. I think it was actually this one, but without the magnifying glass and Phillips head and with the saw. So I reckon a Huntsman model. I got that when I was about 8. I had it for a couple of years. I always remember snapping open and close the tools, cutting myself on the pen blade every other time that I used it. And yeah, I overall enjoyed having it until, because I was 8 or 9 or 10 or however old I was, I lost it because I put it somewhere and got distracted by something else and never picked it up again. So that's my first point of call in the knife world. And I think that's a pretty common place that most folks start. Between there and where I picked up, there was a big, vast black spot with very little other than playing Japanese role-playing games and two-dimensional fighting games for most of my teenage years, until, frankly, until I was a young man, until I was 18 or so. That was my thing, that's what I did. I got married and I moved up to the country in a housing scheme for my employer, and we've had a necessity really took its course and got me looking at knives once again. We moved out to a rural property after a time, but before we did, when I was still in a sort of domestic suburban setting, I wanted to buy a knife. And I think I wanted to buy a knife because I was watching and enjoying the show Man vs. Wild, and I used to see Bear Grylls pull out this cool little knife and do his little knife things with it and then put it back, and it was in the small of his back, all cool like, and I thought, I might get a knife, that looks alright. I was a young dude, and I think a lot of the appeal of knives for men and for young men specifically is there's that primordial sort of, I want to feel useful and have a tool. And I think I was, just off the heel of a 10-year binge of video games and wanting to perhaps be a bit more of a dude. And so I looked and thought, what knife does Bear Grylls have? And that's where we end up with these guys. So literally a Google search of what knife does Bear Grylls have, it came up with these. In truth, Bear's knife in real life is like a custom, the knife that he was using at least was like a UK custom from a small maker. It wasn't this at all or this, but this is what came up. And remember, as someone who doesn't know anything about any of this stuff, this seemed really cool. It had all sorts of stuff on the sheath and, all sorts of things very much in line with what Bear Grylls was selling at that time. And so I had this knife for a while, and you know what? I took it camping. I remember I took it fishing. I didn't know anything about fishing knives or anything. I've actually done a fair bit with this knife. I've still got some crud on it from something. I've actually cleaned fish with it. I've decapitated carp with it, all that sort of stuff. And you know what? It's a sharp edge tool that does an okay job at being a sharp edge tool, but knock my camera over there. But it certainly left me wanting. I started to investigate what other knives were around, and I eventually started thinking of pocket knives too. And so I sort of started thinking, well, there's this Bear Grylls knife, this seems alright, maybe I'll see what the pocket knife is. And just the shared experience of having both of these just started making me look for more. Wanting something a bit more nice or a bit more... You start to see the stigma around these when you do just a little bit more peeling back. And so, not wanting to be the guy with the Bear Grylls set of gear, I thought, well, let's look what else is available. So I turned to Knife YouTube. Now, Knife YouTube back in 2012 was an interesting place. There's always been your smaller channels, but at the time, as someone just getting into Knife YouTube, it was dominated by your nut and fancies and your prepping or your bug out or your bushcraft crossover channels. At that stage specifically, much more than it is today, the knife world was really very much inside the circles of tactical, bushcraft, survival, SHTF, and knives were kind of a part of all those communities. Just knives in general has always been that forumite kind of real, impassioned. There's always been those guys, but when you're just getting into Knife YouTube, your first protocol is probably going to be a nut and fancy video or one of those sort of, and they're still around, those channels, and they've all got a huge amount of subscribers, but that's really where I started. So Nut and Fancy, I think a lot of them are bushcraft themed channels, and of course a channel that's no longer making content anymore but is easily one of the best ones that has existed was Black Owl Outdoors. And having Black Owl Outdoors, just doing a whole catalogue trawl of their videos. I think I was like their 900th subscriber. I remember I was quite new to it, but I remember Crick having this knife, not this knife, this knife, the Mora Bushcraft Black. And this, my friends, is probably the first good knife that I bought, a good fixed blade knife. And it was perfect timing as well, because we just moved out to a rural property where I did actually need to use a knife. I was actually using one a whole lot. Where I used to live, I was doing jobs that I never would have a year before thought I'd be doing. I was quite a nerdy bloke until, you know, and I've always been a bit of a creative type. Making videos, I'm not surprised I'm making videos, but I am surprised I'm a knife guy. Or at least my 18, 19-year-old self would have been. But I moved to a place where I was actually using this guy a whole bunch. What happened, however, though, was a few too many times, due to the ease of these Mora sheaths, I'd go to the post office, I'd have my fixed blade knife still on my hip. I was in a country town, so it's not the biggest deal in the world, but I'd get home and I'd think, or my wife would say, geez, you know, you can't just go out, and in Australia, you can't just open carry a fixed blade knife on your hip, unless you've got a really good reason to. Just one of these things that largely is frowned upon. So I started thinking pocket knives once again. So the experience with this was not going to bring me back to the Gerber Bear Grylls line. This is just a very weak pocket knife, very cheaply made, very sort of indecisive lockup, still is very soft. So a couple of years before, we'd been to the markets in Melbourne, just on holiday, and I was just in that spending mood, and I'd bought myself a Leatherman Wave, and I hadn't really thought too much about it since. I'd used it a little bit around the house when we moved house for, you know, putting IKEA furniture together and things like that, but I didn't know it was quality. So I thought, well, Leatherman make a quality multi-tool that I can see they make a pocket knife too. How bad can it be? It must be good like their multi-tools. And so I got this Leatherman Crater C33. So for a while, this and a few other multi-tools was my main interest. I actually more or less started as a multi-tool enthusiast instead of a knife enthusiast. That was my first point of call. I used to troll multitool.org, which is still a great resource for multi-tool discussion. Grant runs a great ship over there, but I haven't been back for ages because it's just, my focus has shifted. But I used to be multi-tools and, just to an extent, pocket knives. I feel like I just spat over the camera. Anyway, so that's my kind of next point, and this was used for a long time. This was really beaten up. This little pocket knife, I didn't know anything about locks or anything about sort of what would make other knives better for my jobs I was using it for. So as you can see, it just got used and, you know, properly worn away. It's, you know, the steel doesn't hold an edge for very long. It's just 420 HC, unlike, and not even good 420 HC. It's just Leatherman's 420 HC, like on a multi-tool blade. So it wore away. I would try sharpening. I've never been good at sharpening freehand. I didn't have any stuff. So I've kind of ruined this knife, but it's definitely the first sort of proper knife that I ever got, this Leatherman Crater C33. But it was just the start, obviously, of something that got pretty out of control. And then along came this guy. I was hankering for something that was a little nicer than the C33, and I was still very much a multi-tool guy. So looked amongst Leatherman and thought, well, this one is a bit more of a knife-focused multi-tool. So it's still got your pliers. This is the Skeletal CX. Still got your pliers, but this has got one of those nicer blade steels than 154cm. Than 420HC. This has got the 154cm blade. This is the first Leatherman that I ever did a video on, and this was the subject of my first ever video.
Hi there, thanks for joining me in the rain. It's just started drizzling down, but I think we'll stick with it. This shouldn't take...
And that's where we end up. That's how we ended up where we are. I got this and I was so happy with it. I saw what others were doing. I saw what your Nut and Fancies and everyone was doing. And I thought I could do that. So without really any direction, I didn't even know why I wanted to. I just kind of thought I'm going to make a video about this, even though there was already other videos about it. I have nothing particularly new to say about it or anything like that. That's what we do. It's just, I just kind of fired my camera up and I talked through the features, and it's still on this channel. You can look right back to 2013, 6 years ago. You can see this video up and in all of its very mediocre glory, but there it shall stay as a... And this, I think this is most people's first point into gear stuff. A video like that, gear talk. You just fire up your camera and start talking. I didn't really have a plan. And I made like a video about this and a few other multi-tools, and that sort of was me for a bit. I was multi-tool centric, but you know, and this was my main pocket knife. I used to hang it off my belt loop right at the front of my pants, and that was I'd have my Mora Bushcraft Black on my hip, and I'd have this one hanging off my belt loop. And geez, you know what? Between the two of these, there's not much you couldn't get done. So still stand by these two purchases, two really good enduring purchases without a doubt. The Bushcraft Black and the Skeletal. And the way that YouTube was at that time, you couldn't be into knives without at least getting some exposure into axes. And I was again in a place where I could actually use an axe. I actually had a use for an axe rather than just as a collectible. I do miss that because I got these Grandsfors Brux axes. I've always wanted to get the good ones, and these were what seemed to be the good ones at the time. And these have actually done, especially this one, these have done a fair bit of good, like around for me, and I really like them as items as well as tools, very useful tools. So I had my bit of an axe thing as well. I really have only been a dedicated knife person probably for the last 3 years. Until then I was just into a bit of everything. A lot of my earlier videos were sort of, I was just looking at what other people were doing. I'd chop tests, I got a dead tree once and I chopped into them with a few different axes. I ended up closing that video because I got so much hate for cutting into a tree that everyone thought was alive, but it was actually, and I should have, if I'd do it again I would have shown it because it was actually getting some okay views, especially in my channel's infancy. Should have shown the top of the tree. It had been canopied in a storm or something, it had just been ripped off, but because the tree still like bled sap when I cut into it, everyone was like, you're ruining a tree. And that was also my first taste of like the fierce internet that exists in the IKC and the axe community everywhere. And I've sort of always been dealing with that in various ways since those early days as well. So that's me for that point. I've got my skeletal, I've got my axes, some multi-tools, got my Leatherman, which is sort of on the back burner a little bit, but I'm watching YouTube still. At night time, you know, I've never been, since a long time I've been mainly watching YouTube for my entertainment, not TV or anything like that. So, I'm watching and I'm seeing all these other knives. And I've never been, it would never came easy to me spending a lot of money on knives. I never sort of instantly thought I'm going to go buy a zero tolerance for 300 Australian dollars. I did start looking incrementally higher though. That being said, Wrangler Star, another one of those sort of real sort of early this decade channels that was really firing out back when he had titles that actually showed what the video was going to be about. Wrangler Star, he got me, I must say, grailing pretty hard on the Benchmade 940, the green aluminium one, which spoilers I ended up getting. But at that point, it was a big step up for me just to shop for a Delica. So the Spyderco Delica was the next sort of incremental move up in my knife pursuit. And when you get a Delica after having just a crater, or even just as a dedicated pocket knife that's not sort of an amalgam of other features, you do instantly see certain performance improvements and benefits. Now I've always kind of had, once I get somewhere, once I get comfortable with something, I start to really dig into the performance side of things, as is obvious now, which I'm of course going to get to later. But yes, upgrading to a Delica from the crater, even from the skeletal a little bit, having something that's a dedicated cutting tool in your hand, it was really hard to sort of go back from that. And that was probably, like a lot of people, my proper gateway knife into the knife sickness. After this point, once I got the dynamics of how it was just cutting through things, then I started looking at the other attributes and the other things that I perhaps wanted to start looking at too, such as the things that make knives really expensive, actions and steels and handle materials and things like that. A great starter knife for Delica, but also a terrible starter knife for your wallet, your bank account, and your general way of life and way of mind about knives. Now this catastrophically, for my wallet at least, coincided with the time when we moved out of our small rural house. We had another kid, it was too small. I was always worried about like the power wasn't properly done right because it was like a really old house. Just those things you have to start worrying about when you got stupid little kids crawling around that are going to put their fingers in things and stuff. So we moved back into the scheme under my employer, and we've been here ever since. But that at the time freed up more cash and more time, and we were also climbing our prospective career ladder, so we could start to. I could never be able to afford to just buy whatever knife I want. Some guys clearly can, or they have a really good trade economy or whatever. I feel every knife purchase that I buy, even still, I really do. But it was a time where if a hobby was going to take off, it was then, and by gum, it did. So I attained my Grail knife, my original green 940. This is the black 940, which I eventually moved up to. But yes, it was the beginning of the sickness from there. And I continued with YouTube. I was still sort of sitting at about, I think by that point, maybe 1,000 subscribers. I was making knife review videos that were very just basic, didn't have a great deal of personality, very much just doing what I saw the other channels who at that time were really successful doing. So if I saw, you know, someone doing a video about a bug out bag, I'd probably do a bug out bag video. If I saw Nothing Fancy doing, you know, I was just kind of trying to desperately keep up and make my mark on the review game, which wasn't happening. And that's the worst part of being a YouTuber, that you've been doing it for 2 years and you're still not getting anywhere. And it was just, that was the worst time. And I never was upset with no one's watching or anything like that, but I always wished that my videos would be better and would get like, yeah, just take off a bit more. So it was really interesting, and I probably haven't acknowledged this as much as I should, but I sent, who at that point he had 17,000 subs, and I thought, this guy is doing well. I sent Wingman115, John, an email, and I just was like, hey man, what do I do? What's the secret? And to his credit, John obviously watched some of my videos. Hey, he's this rando sending me emails. Watched some of my videos and gave me like proper constructive feedback. And I mean, my channel does not have much in common with him. He's into archery and bow hunting and things like that, but credit where it's due, he gave me some advice that I still follow today. Like, just be a bit more direct, go on with a plan, be a bit simpler, don't ramble as much, just basic stuff. But, you know, having someone actually take the time it gave me a bit of a boost. And so I guess, if anything, I probably didn't change too much, but I just kind of kept at it, because I think he reassured me a bit, you know, it'll get better, or you'll stop and you'll do something else. And it's just so true. You will either stop and do something else. Not many people are going to stay at that 1,000 subs mark. They will just stop. So yeah, luckily I kind of kept my nose to it, and eventually I came, I guess, to the thing that I've generally become known for, or, you know, one of the things, and that is edge retention testing. So it's 2016. I had the Falconeven U2. It was a really small, simple locking folding knife, and I could tell the steel was a lot better than any steel I had before. I have a bit of a brain. There's autism, actual full-fledged in my family, but there's also just really focused personalities. I'm not sure. It's all come a bit later in life to me, like all the stuff that was all the kids got checked back when they were kids. I don't know. I don't know if I'd quite have it if I got checked now, but there's definitely traits. My son's got it. My mum's a lab technician. She's got the focus. I've definitely got that kind of focus on numbers. And I wanted to know exactly, is this still better, or am I just thinking it is because I've paid more for it? So doing some YouTubing once again, I found a channel called Blunt Truth for You, which was defunct as of like 2010 or something, you know, really long time ago. But he was doing cardboard cutting testing with the super gold powder steel of the Falconeven U2. And it showed something to me. It showed me how much better in numbers that knife was versus I think a couple of other types of steel. And while it wasn't perfect, and my steel testing today still isn't perfect, I loved being able to have a way to show you why I thought this steel was the way it was, rather than just, I think it is. You could say, well, I think it is because I've done this, you know, so that really lit a fire in me. And so I think the opportunity came when Ontario released, because I've always wanted to have as much controlled as I could. Ontario released the Ontario Rat 1 in D2 steel. And at that time, I had a Rat 1 in AUS 8, and then I went out and it was no big thing to buy a Rat 1 in D2. So I took it and I put a work sharp edge on it, which is the edge I used to use. And I cut the same rope on this very board that we're still using today, and I did my first test. And there was a lot of interest in that because the knife was quite new, it had just only recently come out. People wanted to know, hey, how much better is D2 than the AUS 8 in edge retention? And I still stress, it's not the be-all and end-all. There's so many other factors, but I always really enjoyed having those data points, and I still get a great deal of pleasure out of those data points. And yeah, there really was this, and then some VG10 that I tested against 14C28 and things like that. And I just found myself, I was answering my own questions, and luckily a lot of the viewers probably also have a similar brain to me, and I was answering their questions as well. So that's definitely what started to kick off my channel a bit more. It's doing something different. Now, I know it is a really frustrating bit of advice to give someone. If you're on YouTube and you're wondering how to sort of get settled in, it is, unfortunately, the way of it. You need to do something different, and then after a year or so, that's not different anymore, so you need to do something else different. So that's kind of what I did. You look at those legacy channels that I was talking about before. Nuttin' Fancy is an interesting case because he's still going. But a lot of them, even though I'm talking the big ones that are over 100,000 subs, right? They're getting about the same view, and I say this with no arrogance, or I'm really trying not to. They get about the same views as this channel does with a much lower subscriber base. It's because that's that diluted subscribers, and the way it works is, just look at my subscriber count. Probably only about a quarter of that is active. That's the way it seems to work, like actively watching every video. Because a lot of your views are from random click-throughs and people that will never subscribe. People who are just looking for information from a single video. So there's that as well. So it really is a case of keeping it dynamic to be able to keep the actual views coming in. Subs means nothing on YouTube, not much anyway. Yeah, it's your way of getting a core user base, but if you've got 100,000 subs and have had that since 2010, your actives are going to be really, really low, and that is just how it seems to work. So I was always trying to think of something new to do, and so that's why every now and then I'll change up the way I'm doing the knife. The knife lab wasn't always the knife lab. It used to just be, here's me testing it with some generic music. These stupid videos I do with the jokes and the Uncle Randy characters, all that sort of stuff, it's all just a way to keep people sort of coming in, because at the risk of sounding like a complete wanker, as a creative type person, someone who's trying to make something, you do want people to watch it, for sure. You want that exposure. And the key to doing that on YouTube is to keep trying to do something new, and every new thing you do, you'll snare a few people, you'll put some people off. I know, I've had people contact me, like my OG subscribers, who please just keep making consumable knife information that demonstrates the dimensions and the capabilities of the knife. There's a base of people that are like that, and I know every time I do a random stupid video, they get upset, and some of them rage quit, and it is just kind of a part of it. You can't be completely beholden to your viewers, because it's kind of a fickle thing. Like, they'll leave eventually as well. They'll just go and start watching someone else who does that same thing better. So you kind of it's a fluid environment, I guess is what I'm saying. So without going too far off on a tangent, you do need to try and keep doing new things and pushing it just a little bit. Don't get safe, because a lot of the channels that are still safe, they kind of just seem to do sponsored content now. Like, I got sent this by this company, here's a review on it, and that's it. And it just doesn't seem to be getting the views anymore. So that's just my advice on YouTube. Anyway, so the still testing kept going, and it got more and more refined. My first few parameters was just 20-degree work sharp edge, wooden chopping board, twisted sisal rope. This was problematic. I've always found this slightly problematic because it's not a precision tool. It's the 20 degrees seems about right, but I never was completely happy with it. I was always much more, so even when I got the Lansky, I could see the measurements, I could measure them myself, and that's the stuff. It wasn't convex, it was just flat. So much more measurable. That's when I started to really kind of put more stock in my own findings. And you can control the grits and things like that. And then from that point, it really did become more of a curiosity endeavor, and definitely beginning to focus more and more on the performance of different steels with different, without trying to compare everything to everything, just trying to see, let's see how this steel does on this knife. And that's kind of where I am now with it as well. The mule project that I'm doing is great at the minute, because it does go back to the good old-fashioned comparable sort of knife versus knife thing. But even then, I've gradually learnt over the years, mainly there's a couple of people who are just really, got real good and real sort of different thinking brains from them about performance and geometry. And learning from them and just hearing people like that talk has really sort of set me off on each knife, while they have the same ingredients often, they are kind of their own beast as well. So a lot of the testing I'm doing now is largely for curiosity on that knife, and also, to get a data point on the steel, but largely about the curiosity of just seeing how the complete picture falls together. It's funny talking about that groupthink, because I've been a victim and a perpetrator of groupthink for a fair portion of my career doing this. A really good example of it is when Spyderco switched to FFG, full flat grind. I remember Nuttin' Fancy did his videos on the Delicate, on the Endura, proclaiming that FFG was the best way to do a knife blade for EDC, the best way to slice. And you know what? I just kind of ran with it. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That sounds like it makes sense. He's saying it with enough conviction that I think that's true. And so, you know what? In my earlier reviews, I'd be like, yeah, and so it's got a full flat grind, and it which means it's a great slicer and it cuts really well and all that sort of thing. And whilst a full flat grind cuts just fine, it cuts good. It's such a weird thing. I hadn't actually tested it, and that's where I think I'm happiest at, admitting I'm wrong, is when I've actually tested something myself. And a good example of that is, I've found that in most applications, a hollow grind for an everyday carry knife is going to cut a lot better than a full flat grind. It's not going to have that inherent strength, but then on an EDC knife, it's probably not as important to have that inherent strength. It's an interesting thing, and it's one of those things I'm always trying to kind of remind myself of. And I look back on some of my old videos and I just cringe, because I am just recycling things that I think are right, but I haven't actually tested. It's like I'm almost tempted to figure out some kind of grip machine that pulls the knife out of my hand, because I want to know how all this stuff actually affects grip. Does Grippy G10? So that could even be my next frontier. I'm not sure. We'll see. But it's the point I'm trying to make, is that a lot of the stuff that I've been thinking lately is purely about, are these things that we repeat and say actually the truth? And that is largely thanks to Sean and Vinny, who are just they say things that are not popular, but they're just valid talking points at the very least. So that's kind of where I am at the moment with my edge testing, with my the way I'm feeling about testing knife performance and things like that. So another cool thing about the start of 2017, I'm not particularly a social person. I am not the best with emails. In fact, I don't really share my email because I'm just not that talkative. Like, I don't have massive amount to say in writing and things like that. That's just my personality, and I think people wish I'd probably talk to them more and they could chat with me all the time, but I'm just not, and I know myself, so I think if I forced it, it'd be obvious. But at the start of 2017, I started to talk to other folks who, I guess, they're not even about knives, but just more similar personalities to me, and I noticed that the reviewers were sort of starting to be a bit more like that as well. And of course, I'm probably referring the most to Nick and the Mark of the Advanced Knife Bro and Dr. Frankie, all those fellas just sort of coming up through. They just seemed to be, it's funny, they almost seems like as of 2016, the knife channels no longer had to have anything to do with that sort of survival, tactical, bushcraft corner. Those corners are still obviously existing and going okay. I don't know, are they going okay on the internet? But the knives in particular, the enthusiasts, I think just more knife actual enthusiasts started getting their own channels and talking. Then maybe they came off the forums and came onto this space, whatever it was. I started to get a few more just knife guys who I didn't have to have those pretenses of survival, bushcraft. I didn't have to feel like you had to keep those circles hydrated, so to speak. So yeah, and you start to actually form decent little online friendships with people, and you meet folks who you actually have similar personal views to as well. Like it's a really cool part of it. So as of 2017 and onwards, it's been good for my own sort of personal knife guy development as well, just to have people that I do chat to quite frequently, and that's been much appreciated. And I never really set out to do that. I've always just been happy to share and then turn off my computer and say, well, that's my thoughts shared. I know, very one-way, very selfish, of course, but it just kind of is what it is. I'm not the best at the two-way stuff. I know myself. I try and be as honest as I can about it. But yeah, so I did, as of probably the last 18 months, things have gotten better with me in terms of actually talking to folks, and largely not even about knives, just about the world. I'm very interested in American politics, for example, and I watch people of all different views. I watch Jake at Prepper's Bunker, and I talk to Nick, and I talk to all folks about sort of how it is over there, because it's I'm so far removed from you guys in your community. It's just really interesting to see as well. So just that as a sub point too. Just I really do try and take all kinds and try and consume all kinds. It's just I'm not the best at talking back sometimes. So that's just another little thing about myself. So it's 2018 now. Well, it isn't now, but in this part of the story, it's 2018. My edge testing is really going quite gangbusters. It's doing really well. I'm doing lots of different edges. I'm really happy with the data, and some quite remarkable people have sort of entered my horizons. So Dave, and you've got Chris, and you've got other Chris, you've got Nick, obviously Shabazz, you've got Daniel, Travis, Frank, Rice, you sent me that the Modus, just all sorts of remarkable folks who are happy to send me their stuff to either prove points or disprove points or whatever. And it's another area of the community that often just amazes me, just stumps me. So yeah, that's kind of where I am, and that's carried on even since. So I've got, you know, guys who I just have really good dialogue, mostly just about the knife stuff with, but it always just amazes me that folks are happy to send me their stuff along. The testing has gone really well since that, and largely because of that as well. Like, obviously I've got my drive to do it. The patrons have helped as well, affording the rope and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I couldn't run this story without just definitely paying, you know, tribute to some really like just generous people who are happy to be without their knives for a long time. So this is the thing, lots of folks want me to do a knife for them or something like that, but they want it back in a month. And I just, yeah, and I'll talk a bit about my creative-ish process in a minute, but yeah, just the generosity of some folks. Not that they're giving me stuff for free, often, you know, it's just to lend and send back, but just, I mean, sometimes they do just say keep it. It's crazy. So if you're one of the folks who've helped me out either directly or through Patreon, even if you're not a patron anymore, like, I really do appreciate it. You've done a lot to help out this endeavor here. That being said, in 2018, I guess I started to learn, I don't know, I don't quite have the reach that I suggest that, say, Nick has, but I started to sort of learn about the consequences of things that could happen as well. So I had a couple of steals that didn't work for me very well at all, and those whole incidents taught me a whole lot and just made me make resolutions a whole lot about how to deal with these things when they happen. Steel wheel, there was an odd experience with some steel wheel where the Rockwell tests must have been low, like the Rockwell numbers, because the knife just wouldn't cut paper. And, you know, it was a funny experience, and one that sort of showed me a side of things that I really don't enjoy. It's this side of the internet knife community that is really quick to jump to conspiracy and thinking the worst of these companies and stuff. And I mean, a healthy dose of cynicism is fine towards big conglomerates, but it kind of got out of control. I was happy to show the data, and I was happy to retest and show when it was correct. But the rest of it is just it was just too much for me. I didn't enjoy it. And my main economy here, as I always say, is my own enjoyment. And being on the forefront of the myth busting and of the I guess of any kind of campaign against the company saying your knife is shit because of this, I really just didn't enjoy being there. And you know what, maybe it would be great if I was happy to, go and test out every knife. But for example, since then, I wouldn't be doing Benchmade bailout testing unless I could get 10 of them at once and do them all. Because I'm pretty sure if I want to give bad news about a company, I want to be coming from a damn good spot to be doing it. It's where I want to start having proper science to back me up, rather than just my bro science, which is kind of good for making little data points here and there. But since that, and since just the way I handled it, I was never super happy with. I was just a fish out of water a bit as well. My only advice to folks, because I know there's a lot going on at the moment, my only advice to folks would be is just to remember all the folks who work in these places, they're just people like you as well, and just like you fuck stuff up, so do they. And just even like you might handle something awkwardly when it's sprung on you, so might they. And that's just that's how I've learnt from either Bark River when they sent me a knife that was not labelled correctly or whatever. They're just people, man. Like, we're all just people. And it's, when we're caught out, we act in cringy and awkward ways sometimes, or sometimes we handle like a complete champ. It's either way, but my only thing is just be moderate. Present the facts, present the things you can show, and then just kind of let that do the talking for it, I think. That's just my advice to feel better about it in a year's time. I wish I'd done a bit less talking about it and just more like I'd done the video, did the follow-up video. And I mean, even then, I don't think I was too much with Steel Wheel or with Bark River, but yeah, just the unhealthy dialogue that grew around it, I wasn't super, like a massive fan of. And I kind of have my regrets about it a little bit. I never have regrets about showing the result of something, and I always will. If I was to test my favourite knife, if I was to test this Mastrop King, which I love, and the steel was shit, of course I would show you. Of course I would show the result, but I'd probably just leave it at that, I'd leave it at that one video. And that's the advice I'd give for now, but take it for what it is. So back to my knife hobby. During this edge testing period, of course, testing all these fancy steels is bringing a lot more fancy knives across my table. And I've been at these saturation points where I've had 20 or 30 pocket knives which I own in my house. And yeah, we're talking thousands of dollars of production knives. I've always only ever been production knives. I think my logical brain can't quite grasp the extra bespoke fees that you pay for custom knives. And I would never hold against anyone the joy that they get from customs. I just don't have it, and that's just me. But in terms of fancy knives that are still just, this is hilarious. Like, really think about it. Like, why do I have $1,000 easily of knives on the table in front of me now? You know, it is just because it's part of the hobby and I enjoy them as objects just as much as I enjoy using them. However, that's the point where I've sort of stopped, and I'm definitely scaling back. This may be my 5 unsellables. The Buck Marksman sometimes is in there as well, and then I've got like example knives like Delicas and, you know, Ontarios. Well, this is Dave's, but Ontarios and things like that as well. But this may be them, and this is what I'm trying to do now. This is kind of where I am at as a knife collector, just trying to keep things simple and knives that I really do enjoy carrying. Because I think in the flurry of enjoyment of testing, I have gotten sort of bulked up with knives, and I've sort of got, I've lost my perspective a bit on, you know, why I would want any of them to begin with. It's, the testing is one thing, and that's more learning about the steels and the blades and things like that. But when it comes to just the actual pieces, the actual knives, is something I'm trying to sort of get back on. Me as a channel, I have for a while now, I've had certain rules. I am basically I don't take anything from anyone to review for free, apart from in really rare cases, and usually it's from other people in the knife community, individuals. One knife I do have coming, I believe, is Jake sending me a knife that he's designed. And that's something I'm really looking forward to checking out, because it's like just another guy, and this is like a thing, but what I'm saying is I don't really have any dealings with any companies, and largely I've regretted ever doing it. I've never been quite happy with the videos I've made. I've always felt a rush, even if the company was totally cool, I've always felt a rush to get it out, and just made a product that I didn't really like. I have no criticism of people who, as long as you're doing accurate and you're not pulling any punches of your reviews, I have no criticisms of people who do almost entirely donated stuff. Whatever, as long as you're honest and as long as you can sleep at night, it's totally fine. But just for me, and again, this comes back to that sort of creative process, I just don't love having something that didn't occur to me myself to go and look into, and then having to sort of, in the back of my head, make a video about it in a certain point of time. And I think the last thing that was sent to me for free, the way I felt about it caused me to go and buy my own, and that was the Spyderco Waterway. The only time I haven't regretted, there's 2 times that I haven't regretted taking free stuff from a company. One was with the nutsack bag, because it was an excellent bag, and I didn't find that a hard bag to review because I really liked it. And the other one was the Benchmade Fact. I personally wouldn't say, I'm not sure if I'd say no to Benchmade again. I probably would, because I remember when it got there, I was so happy that I liked it, because I was like, what if I get this knife and I don't fucking like it? And it's like, how do I do that? How do I do that review? And when I realized that, I was like, I probably shouldn't be doing this with these dealing with the companies. So I've stopped. Largely, you see on my Instagram, I don't want free stuff. It says there's not a great deal of contact I get from companies anymore, basically because I've taken my email off of everything, because once you get to a certain level on YouTube, you do get lots of offers from lots of companies, and it's just not me. If it's you, then that's totally cool, but it ain't me, babe. So yeah, and the reason I'm covering so much on YouTube about this is because it is so intrinsically linked to my knife hobby at the moment. In fact, I think if one thing was to go, it would be the knife hobby, and the YouTube would stay, because I was a drama geek at school, always trying to do music and just all sorts of expression, and this is the most comfortable state. And it's like one of those people, it's like when someone's seems really outgoing, it's like often the gloomiest people you meet are comedians. I probably seem like I'm very I'd be able to talk for hours in person, but I guarantee you if we had a big knife meetup, I'd probably be one of the more quiet ones at the table. So it's just one of those things. This is just a very holistic way of me to express myself, because it is in my exact terms that I enjoy doing it in. So it's the knives have been great to do this. This is what I really enjoy doing, but then I'm not so arrogant that I think that people would still be watching if I just decided to not do videos about knives. It's not a burden, it's a happy coincidence. Loving the knives, loving the content, it's all good. In the future, I'm probably going to be looking at more performance-based testing on my knives. I'm getting to the point where I'm almost on steel fatigue, like I've got numbers next to basically every steel. Of course not every steel, but a lot of the steels. So I'm going to be sort of looking probably just at more doing reviews and things like that. I'll always be doing rope cut testing and cutting a lot of sisal rope, but I'm probably going to be doing it more as once I've got all my testing done for now, I'm going to be doing it more of this is how this individual knife performs. And yeah, of course the steel results will continue to get charted and that sort of thing, but I've learned too much recently about grinds and about geometry and things like that, just to not keep it as simple anymore, to let it grow and let it sort of see what happens. As I said, you have to keep changing it up to stay alive on YouTube. I'm going to continue making stupid videos. I know that not everyone likes them. I'm going to continue making long, rambly talking videos. I'm going to continue doing silly things like the Steel tier list and Uncle Randy, and you know what? There'll probably even be Dickhead Survival coming back soon as well. So I'm going to keep trying to do all the old stuff. It's funny, I've been in a bit of an odd spot with the whole thing in the last couple of weeks. Probably just because I've probably not been getting enough sleep because I'm, doing a slightly different pattern of shifts. There's probably a completely organic reason to it, but I think I'm sort of at the end point, and I found it very therapeutic to sort of go back from where I began all the way through into where and why I'm at now. And also just to acknowledge some stuff, like to acknowledge some things that have sort of got me here too. So whilst it is a bit of an exercise in ego, making a video about myself, I guess I do have an ego. I'm a YouTuber. Like, that's what it is. And yeah, there's a few things I'm looking at on YouTube as well. I'm thinking of just letting it run loose in the comments a bit. I've probably been a bit too, and this is, again, maximum self-awareness mode activated. I've probably been a bit too sensitive about shitty comments, You should probably just let these people say their piece, let them slag you off and whatever in the comments, and probably just leave them there. I've probably been a bit too happy with the banhammer with people who are just insistently aggro, and maybe it's all just good engagement. So I'm thinking a few things like that, and I mean, what's the saying? If you can't think of something nice to say, then fuck off and go and be a cunt somewhere else. Isn't it? That's what it is, isn't it? But yeah, I'm sort of on the turning a corner with all that sort of stuff as well, I think. Maybe I'm just growing up a little bit. Don't know. Anyway, that's where I'm at knives at the moment. Smaller collection, performance base, testing methodology, always be testing, always using a nerd brain on this sort of stuff. Don't worry about that. The videos are going to be at my leisure, like the things that I want to review. Hey, if I want to buy a knife that's like 10 years old and review, if I want to review a K-bar tomorrow, then for sure. And you know what? I'm going to be reviewing a classic style Buck 110 pretty soon. So I don't think this channel will ever be the one that's on the forefront of the bleeding edge purchases. So that's probably not going to change. I won't be getting the latest, match drop collaboration on this channel. That's just not me. There's plenty of other guys that do that awesomely. So I guess that's just kind of the direction and the future of where I'm likely to go. Just kind of poncing along, making the stuff that I like to make, doing my shit little skits in between things, and having a bit of a laugh, and then also trying to harden a little bit up as well when it comes to like just the negatives and all that stuff, sort of stuff that naturally comes hand in hand with it all. I've just made some notes. I'm just kind of periodically checking them to see, but I'm pretty sure I've covered everything that I wanted to talk about. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you haven't minded a relatively meme-free, maybe, although you never know what I'll do post-production. They're relatively lean offering in terms of just conversation in general. That's my knife collecting YouTube story up to this point. Stay with me. We'll be doing some new, some old, some good, some bad stuff, I'm sure, in the next little while. Ta-ta and farewell.
Ta-ta and farewell.